This is Pacific War by Victory Games. I'm currently playing the Battle for the Coral Sea, and the eagle-eyed amongst you might notice that I've done a reset. So I had a really interesting situation brewing. We'd got the American carrier group somewhere in here, the Japanese carrier group was somewhere in here, and the Americans had managed to detect the Japanese had managed to detect the American carrier group, flew a beautiful air mission in, we did all the cap, we did the flak, we shot down some planes, the Japanese went in, they put 3 hits on the Yorktown, it was all really impressive. The Americans were being shadowed by 2 Japanese groups of light ships. They landed up here, they were threatening Port Moresby, it was all going off. It was all really interesting. The Americans had difficult decisions to make as to what to do. And I was just flicking through the rules and I noticed that the range of your aircraft or air missions is the full range there and back. And that completely changed the geometry of the situation. The situation we had couldn't have arisen with those rules. The Japanese airstrikes, all the searching was being done incorrectly because I was flying. Well, I'm assuming that searches follow those rules as well. I'm going to have to check that, but certainly combat flights do. And that means that the relationship between your search tables and your potential combat strikes are very different. And as I say, the geometry of the game changes because carriers are able to close to 3 hexes of each other before they can launch strikes, rather than sitting 8 hexes away from each other, where one is essentially only detectable if the other side's got other aircraft or other ships that can do it. So the situation was rather untenable, and I was wondering how the Americans were meant to do anything at all with good Japanese play. So I've done a reset because it was necessary, because that rules mistake was so fundamental. I was getting everything else right. I was getting the sequence of play right, I was doing the strikes right, I was doing the combat right. I think I was doing pretty much everything else right, the time movement, everything. But that did change the layout of the game so fundamentally, I felt I had to restart. So what I've done is I've been back through the operation contact phases. We did 5 phases again, exactly like last time. The Americans stopped it after 5, took their move. We've had some searches, but they've all been unsuccessful. And now we're going from here. We're coming into a lighting phase, and the Japanese player is wondering whether to exercise their right to choose the lighting, or whether they need to do that given the new understanding of the ranges, because what I was worried about before was that with 7 range, American fighters could fly off this carrier group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and sink my transports. But now that I understand that they'd have to fly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, couldn't even make it that far, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I don't seem to have to worry about that. Even if I come forward into Guadalcanal and they come forward too, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, then I might have to worry. But by then I'll have had my moves and I'll have landed on Guadalcanal. So I'm not worried about being sunk as transports. And if they get to move first and come forward too, then they're flying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and they can't make it back. So I think I can allow the lighting to be randomly determined and keep my powder dry for another time and still get to Guadalcanal safely. So that's the calculation I'm making at the moment. I'm going to check what's going to. No, I'm going to allow the lighting to be determined randomly. So let's do a random roll for the lighting. as we go into battle phase 1. It's a 7, which means we are day PM, and that suits us okay because then we're going to get dusk and night. So the chances are the Americans can't hit us with aircraft now. Dusk, it's going to be risky. Night, it's going to be risky, and so we're going to have a couple of turns of jockeying for position through the night before we hit this day turn. This is all going to get quite interesting. So yeah, let's have a roll then to see who's got the initiative, the advantage in this first battle segment of the revised Battle of the Coral Sea. And it is a 4 versus 2. It is actually the Americans winning the first initiative the first initiative win I've ever rolled for them. So we've got American initiative now, and I'm going to have to sort of revise my thinking and my planning, my understanding. I'm going to have to recheck ranges of air missions and of searches and of all kinds of things and pick this up afresh. But I'm glad I spotted it in battle segment 3 before I got deep in it and then realised the whole game I'd run was a complete wash because none of the things I'd done were legal. So back with it and into, yeah, this is the Coral Sea revisited. So back at the Coral Sea, the Americans moved forward. Slightly different plan this time, given the rules now. Decided to try and perhaps consolidate our forces, so we're planning to join together. The aircraft carriers did manage to send out a search and locate this task force, and it's worth noting that aircraft searching is not considered movement. So you just use the units and the charts as I have been doing, and that makes sense because if it were movement, then a searching aircraft moving into hexes would prompt combat air patrol and flak and all kinds of stuff, and it's fairly clear that it doesn't. So that all makes sense. And as we had previously worked out, this task force is just outside strike range, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The aircraft wouldn't make it back to the carriers if they sent a strike out, and so the Americans are not going to do that. And we're going to therefore move into the Japanese phase. Oh, one thing the Americans did do that I remember to do, and this is another advantage to sort of playing a couple of turns of a scenario and then getting comfortable with it and then starting to work out more sensible moves. The Americans had a long-range aircraft based here, and it was absolutely useless there. It was never going to be within range 8 of anything, and so they rebased it into Port Moresby, where it's got a much more active role in searching the surrounding area for Japanese incoming task force. So that seemed a very sensible thing to do, and that should then free up the carriers to go about the business of hunting down and killing things rather than just putting themselves in harm's way by having to search for them. So that seemed very sensible on the American part. Now I've got the Japanese to do, who are the disadvantaged player, and they have got their moves, and there'll be some searches throughout this as well, but it doesn't really matter. Well, it won't matter because they won't really be able to launch many strikes at things, and so it's really just a case of moving, and then we'll see where we're at. So I've come into a new battle phase here in Pacific War, Battle of the Coral Sea. We've done lighting determination. It's now dusk, and the Japanese just won the advantage die roll, and so we'll move first in this phase, and that's interesting for them. And trying to work out, how things might unfold through the next couple of battle cycles, because we're going to get dusk and then night, which are going to make air missions very dangerous or difficult or impossible. So dusk, the rules are that if you fly a combat air mission then upon landing you have to roll a dice, a 10-sided dice, and you have to get equal to or less than 3 times the level of the aircraft, or that aircraft loses a step. So level 1 aircraft, which is what I think the Americans have mostly, would have to roll 0 through 3. Some of the good Japanese level 2 aircraft could survive on a 0 through 6. Well, I say survive, avoid losing a step, but that's quite a high price to pay, a step, just for sending it on a mission. That's, you know, in addition to what the mission costs you. So dusk is not a good time to be trying to fly missions, certainly not with level 0 or level 1 aircraft. Level 0 obviously would lose a step automatically. Level 1's likely to lose a step. Level 2's you might risk, but then you don't want to be, you know, it's risk reward, isn't it? Or risk and outcome. So level 2 aircraft, you're less likely to lose them, but you don't want to lose them because they're your best aircraft. Anyway, we're in this position. The Japanese have got the moves to make, and I think they're going to try and do roughly what they were doing before. They're going to try and advance out perhaps and screen these naval forces. We're going to try and keep 3 hexes away so that they can't come and engage us directly in combat. I think 3 hexes will give us a decent shout at detecting them, and then we'll carry on with our plan to try and get our troops on the ground up in this area up here, exactly as we did previously in the aborted game where I was getting the air ranges wrong, but we'll carry on doing that. So I think I've had a look around, and I'm thinking, do the Americans want to make any searches right now during this part before anything moves in the Japanese advantage movement phase? And I can't see that they do. They've no reason to right now. So these guys will come in here. I think these guys will come in here. I think this task force will move up there, and this task force will slide in here. And at that point, I think the Japanese will have a couple of goes at some identification here from these 2 task forces. This has got a seaplane carrier in it, and this has got a seaplane carrier in it. So those will both be decent shots at searches on the 2 American task forces. Make sure I'm using the Japanese. So that's our screen. So let's come down here. Dusk still counts as day on the search chart. So day, 3 hexes away, with a naval spotter unit. 30% chance, 0, 1 or 2. So on task force 1, let's give that a go. Nope. And on task force 2, nope, haven't found a thing. Still unable to find the American forces. We did find them at the end of last turn, to be fair. Not with great intel, but we are aware they're there. Anyway, the question is, do the Americans want to run any searches? And I think the answer is no, not just yet. They can wait till the end of movement, I think. So I don't think these guys are going to move. This guy is 2 hexes away from his target, and so he stays further out of search range if he stays back here, so he might stay put. And this task force is going to have a think. might slide in. He's got a couple of choices here and here. Okay, I think he'll slide in here. There. Okay. So now we've got another option to search either side, but the Japanese have searched these two hexes and for these two task forces, so can't search again in the same phase. They can search again next phase though. And the Americans haven't done any searches yet. So they'll have a search. This guy's now in sort of strike range of these carriers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they're going to have a search for this fella down here. See what they can find. So again, make sure we're using the Allied charts. 3 hexes away with air units. Well, we'll do the search anyway, but I've just said it's within strike range. It is, but it's dusk, which is why they were willing to approach a bit closer. Anyway, 0 through 3 to search for them. They've got a 2, so they found them. They do at least have the option of launching the strike if they wanted to do so. They've got accurate information on the types of ships in there now, or the number of capital and non-capital ships, and whether it contains aircraft carriers. What other searches could they do? Okay, there's a long-range aircraft up here that can do a search in here at a range of 3. We'll have a quick roll here, and they've got a 7. That's not going to do anything. And now we come into the Japanese air mission phase. And they don't have any carrier-based air missions to do, I don't think, but they can search again for both of these guys with their seaplanes, so we'll do that first. And we've got a 2, which 2. Let's use the right charts. 3 hex range with a naval spotter is a red result, so they have spotted this task force, and the other one you get a 3 and can't locate it. So the other questions then are, do they want to go out at dusk and say try bombing this airfield? But the dusk thing is putting me off from doing that. So I don't think we do. I think we can happily live without the risk of losing aircraft at dusk and just move on. So we are going to go straight down the track into the American disadvantage movement phase, and we'll see what the US want to do. Well, the Americans decided very quickly not to mess around with their aircraft at dusk, and they simply moved up to try and consolidate their naval forces with their sort of cruiser force in here and their aircraft carrier force in here. They were hoping maybe as we moved into night to win the initiative and be able to engage these in gunnery combat, naval combat, but I rolled us forward into the night phase. I moved our day marker forward, and then I rolled the initiative, and it came out 5-2 in favour of the Japanese. So the Japanese have won the initiative again here, and so are going to be able to escape away from those those American cruisers and keep control of the battle here. So winning the initiative is really important, really important. You want it, and you want it at specific times. And the Americans aren't getting it at the moment, and so that's going to allow the Japanese during the night to roll this task force forward into here and drop off its other ground units ready for an attack on Port Moresby. It's going to let them mess around with these units and attempt to get some intel gathering going on the American fleets or task forces. And it's just going to give them the initiative as it sounds, and it's going to allow them to keep their own carrier forces well out of the way and see how things unfold. So that's what we've got going on. I'll keep pushing forward. Pacific War, Battle of the Coral Sea. I'm still ironing out little wrinkles in my understanding of the rules. The latest one is that each battle cycle we have an advantage movement and disadvantage movement segments, and we also have an advantage air mission and disadvantage air mission segments. In those air mission segments, you can't search for naval units, you can only search for air units. In other words, air units that are flying missions can be searched for to detect them so that you can fly cap and fire flak and all the rest of it, but otherwise you can't conduct searches in those phases, which is interesting. It doesn't mean, so it means you don't get 2 consecutive phases of searching for naval units, which is what I sort of thought was happening, and grew more and more sort of suspicious of my own understanding there, and it proved my understanding was wrong. Thankfully, I'm picking these errors up at early stages before they matter, apart from the air range one, which obviously prompted a bit of a rethink. But yes, the situation then we have here, we are in the night light phase of, I think this is the 3rd battle cycle. This Japanese, this is a seaplane carrier, and was parked in here, and the Americans had advanced on it with their cruisers hoping to engage it in some gunnery. The Japanese won the initiative and escaped, but while they were here they were able to run some search missions and located this force, and you can see that none of the Japanese at night have been located. The Americans even tried to fly some long-range aircraft into here at a range of 1 and to pick up this task force, which has dropped off troops in there, by the way, and completely failed to find them. Rolled a 9, terrible, couldn't locate anything. So we've got this situation where this force is located, and you think, well, big deal, it's night time. Well, there's that one exception to the night air rules that I mentioned, which is that twin-engined Japanese aircraft can make attack runs against task forces. This is a task force, and in here, 02, we have a force over on this chart here, which includes these twin-engined Japanese bombers with a range of 16, 255. So a naval attack of 2, air-to-air of 2, naval of 5, ground of 5. They've taken 3 hits, so their actual values are 022, so not exactly fantastic, but it's an attack in a range of 16. They can come 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and make it safely back to base. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to fly this night mission out onto these the ships here and have an attack run against them. So let's go through this process, because I'm not sure how much of it I've done now that I've restarted and deleted a lot of film, which was all wrong. So what happens is that we're in the air mission phase, the advantage air mission phase. The Americans get to make a detection roll against that air mission as it comes into the ship's hex, and that determines whether they'll get to fire flak before or after the strike attack by the aircraft. So we come down here onto this chart, just check that this is the Allied screen. I always go the wrong way. Yes, it is. Okay, so we are trying to detect an air mission at night, 0 through 4 on the dice. They've got a 4, so they are going to get a flak roll against the incoming. They have got flak of 1 and 2, a flak of 3, so they will get a roll on the 3 chart. This is automatically coordinated because there's only one plane. They roll a 6, and I can tell you that on the 3 chart a 6 is going to be no effect. Now the Japanese get a roll. They have got, as we understand, a air to naval factor of 2, so they're going to be rolling on here, and they need a 0, 1 or 2 to do anything. So let's just give them a roll on their attack, and they get a 4 and they miss, and we're all done, and they fly home after an unsuccessful, but thankfully sort of uneventful in terms of casualties, mission, and they can fly back to their holding box. So didn't work out for them, but was probably worth trying, given that there was very little risk, and the only risk they were running was flak, and they may not have even been detected and may have got their strike in first. So that is the end of the Japanese air mission phase, the advantage air mission. We're not going to have any naval combat, we're not going to have any bombardment or ground combat, so we are going straight into the disadvantage movement phase, and it's up to the US fleets to decide what they want to do. What do they want to do? So they're kind of here and here. We've got to get in and try and respond to or defend Port Moresby first and foremost, and we also want to keep our carrier group away from these kind of screening forces, but yeah, I think we're going to move our carriers up round this way over the next couple of turns, so we're either going to move them sort of in here or sort of up here and then in here. Yeah, that might be good. And then I think we are going to pile our cruisers towards this bunch again and see if we can catch them in the morning and engage them in some gunfire. It would have been lovely to catch them overnight because we would have ended up at shorter range, but we will try and come through and catch them in here. So yeah, let's move our carriers 1, 2 up there, and I'm ignoring the fact that there could be searchers at any point, because in the night, I mean, the Japanese could fly a long-range search out of here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but even if they locate it, they're not going to get to do anything with that information. I can make a roll for them, and on a 0 we can say that they know what's going on, but no. And then likewise here, these have already been detected, so there's no need to search for them again. It was a blue detection, so not perfect, but they know that there's two non-capital ships in there and no aircraft carriers, so you know, and they'll come in here. And I think that's what the Americans want to do for movement, and then they've got an air mission phase, and what I think we want to do in the air mission phase is rebase one of our search aircraft, our long range search aircraft, which we've got sat up here. I think we're going to rebase it over into here. So I'm going to grab a new unused force marker here and block it on the map here, force 3, and I'm going to drop in from force 2 this long range search aircraft so that it's closer to the action. I might what range have these got? These bombers are range 12, and I've got 6 steps of them. Those are range 26. I mean, at range 12 they are absolutely of no use at all where they are. So let's rebase those as well. Let's rebase these range 12 bombers and these long range aircraft into that airfield at wherever that is, something island, Thursday Island. Let's come in there and do some rebasing to get those air into the action. So that's the only air moves for the Americans in the night phase. So we move the day track on to, so we're on day 8 out of 21, and we hide all the discovered task forces, which is that one, and that's it. Okay, and then we go into the lighting phase, and as usual the Japanese could push the, because they've not used their special ability during intercept to control the lighting, they could push it forward too into the random determination, but pretty much the random determination gives you a 70% chance of it being day PM and starting the track again here. So I don't think they want to do that. I think we'll accept a day AM turn and see what we can do the next go through. Because day AM actually isn't too bad for us, because that if we do get caught by these cruisers, then we're in the day and in open water we'll be at long range, which is the best for us. We want to try and escape from those. So that's not too bad, and there's no more danger from aircraft than normal here, so we're quite comfortable, I think, with our situation as the Japanese. So we don't want to go messing around with the light until we can see clear advantage for us in doing so. So lighting phase is done. Let's do an advantage determination roll, and then I'm going to wrap up this particular segment of footage. So let's see what we get. And that is a American 5, a Japanese 1, and we have American advantage going into this phase, and I think we're going to see some naval combat. Yeah, definitely going to see some. Well, we might see some naval combat, assuming that the Americans can detect whatever. Well, they know what this is. This carrier, seaplane carrier. So if the Americans can detect it, they'll try and sink it, and yeah, and they'll get to carry on manoeuvring their aircraft carriers around. Sinking this will be great for them, because what it will do, if they can sink this, is give their carriers more flexibility to park in this kind of area without being constantly detected by seaplanes off that seaplane carrier. So it will give them more tactical manoeuvrability, because at the moment what they're worried about is always having their carriers detected and being vulnerable to airstrikes from things that they haven't yet found, which is obviously the key concept in sort of carrier warfare. So sinking this protects them from that detection and gives them more chances to control this area undetected. So let's see how this goes as we move through the next battle phase.